The battlefield was silent now, but the silence felt wrong. Captain Elias moved carefully through the ruins of the ancient starship, his boots pressing against broken metal plates that once carried soldiers into a fight. The war that had torn this place apart was long forgotten, yet the ship still carried the smell of fire and death. His light flickered against the cold walls as he moved deeper inside, searching for something that was never meant to be found. The records had said this starship vanished 150 years ago. No survivors. No bodies. No answers. Yet here he was, walking through corridors that still whispered of screams. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. Elias felt a weight pressing on him, as if history itself was watching. He told himself he was only here for salvage, but deep inside, he knew this mission was more than that. He reached a chamber sealed by half-broken doors. Forcing them open, he saw the glow of machines that should not have been alive. Energy pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat refusing to die. And in the center of the chamber lay a pod, its glass cracked, its metal scarred. Inside there was a figure. Elias froze, his breath caught in his chest, because the figure was not bones or dust. It was a girl. Her skin glowed a soft blue, untouched by time. Her hair spread across the pillow like rivers of night. She wore armor that looked as if carved from stone and fire, glowing faintly as if it still remembered war. Elias's hands trembled. He had seen many things in his life, but never someone like her. She looked asleep, not dead, as if the centuries had been only minutes, and her armor still warm to the touch. He whispered to himself, trying to understand. How could someone lie here, untouched, when the battle ended long before his grandfather was born? He reached out slowly, brushing dust from the pod. The symbols on its side were alien, yet they pulsed faintly as if recognizing him. He felt the hum of life inside, but it made no sense. Was she alive, or had the machine only preserved her shadow? Elias could not look away. The girl stirred slightly, or maybe it was just his imagination. Her lips were parted, her chest rising faintly under the glowing armor. The warmth spread through the pod as if it reacted to his presence. Fear and awe tangled in his chest. What if she opened her eyes? What if she was not human at all? He had fought aliens before, but never met one like this. She seemed both dangerous and fragile, a mystery wrapped in steel and fire. Elias's calm crackled in his ear. His crew was asking for updates, wondering why he had gone silent. He did not answer. Words would break this moment, and he was not ready. He leaned closer, studying her face. She was beautiful, but not in a way he could explain. She looked like someone who carried storms behind her eyes, someone who had once commanded both fear and loyalty. He wondered what battle had taken her here, and why the universe had chosen him to find her. The pod systems pulsed brighter now, as of awakening. Warning lights blinked across the ruined chamber. Elias knew he should step back, call his crew, and leave this mystery sealed. Yet he could not move. Something inside told him this discovery would change everything. Not just for him, but for humanity itself. He placed his hand gently against the glass, and the pod responded with a deep, low hum that echoed like a heartbeat through the dead ship. Elias kept his hand on the glass, feeling the faint vibration moving through his skin. The pod seemed alive, as if it had been waiting for this moment. He wanted to believe it was a dream, but the warmth beneath his fingers told him this was real. His mind raced with questions that had no answers, but his heart told him to stay. The girl inside the pod looked peaceful, but her armor told another story. It was scarred, cracked, and glowing faintly with hidden power. Elias imagined the battle she had faced. He saw in his mind the clash of ships, the fire raining across the sky, the last stand of warriors who refused to surrender. She must have fought until the end, carrying the weight of her people. Yet here she was, preserved while the world outside had moved on. He leaned closer, watching for any sign of life. Then he saw it, a slow breath, a faint rise of her chest, a whisper of life that had survived the centuries. Elias felt his heart pound faster. She was alive. Somehow, against time itself, she had endured. He whispered her lie without even knowing her name. The thought made him tremble, because if she opened her eyes, everything he knew would change. The calm crackled again in his ear. "Captain, do you read?" We found nothing but wreckage. Are you coming back? Elias wanted to answer, but his throat was dry. He could not explain what he had found. Not yet. If word reached the galaxy that an alien warrior from Forgotten War had survived, every power, every fleet, and every hand of greed would come for her. Humanity was not ready for the secret. He pulled the comm from his ear and turned it off. The pod's lights grew brighter, filling the chamber with orange and blue glow. Symbols along the side began to shift, rewriting themselves as if adjusting to his presence. He felt his pulse match the rhythm of the hum. Slowly, the glass misted and then cleared, as if it was breathing. Elias stepped back, his hand still trembling, but he could not look away. This was no machine. This was a guardian of a past he could not understand. Suddenly, her hand twitched. Just a small movement, but it sent a shock through his veins. He froze, his breath locked in his chest. Her fingers tapped against the armor, as if testing life. Then her lips parted, and a faint sound escaped. It was not a word he knew. It was soft, broken, like a fragment of a song lost in time. Elias leaned closer, trying to hear, afraid and desperate at once. He whispered back, even though he knew she could not hear. The girl's eyes fluttered for a moment. Blue light glowed faintly beneath her lids, then faded. She was not fully awake, but she was not gone. The pod seemed to respond, feeding more energy into her body. The glowing cracks in her armor pulsed brighter, painting her like a statue of fire and ice. Elias realized that this was not just preservation. The pod was repairing her, restoring her, preparing her for something greater. His mind could not escape the thought that maybe she was meant to wake again. Elias fell to one knee, his head heavy with awe. He had fought in wars. He had seen friends die. He had walked through fire. Yet none of that compared to this. He was staring at the past, but also at the future. If she woke, she might carry knowledge of enemies humanity had never faced. If she woke, she might remember a war that still had shadows across the stars. He touched the glass once more, and this time he did not tremble. He knew he was no longer just a soldier. He was a witness to a story that had never ended. The pod's hum grew louder, as if it sensed that its secret was no longer safe. Elias steadied his breath and pressed his hand firmly against the glass. The warmth traveled through his skin, rising like fire along his veins. He wanted to pull away, but he could not. Something in that touch held him in place, as if the girl inside was reaching back to him from beyond time. The ship creaked above him, reminding him how fragile his safety was. The wreck could collapse at any moment, burying both him and the pod under centuries of metal and ash. But Elias did not care. His eyes stayed locked on her, on the faint glow beneath her skin, on the armor that seemed alive. He knew the galaxy would pay any price to claim her, and that thought chilled him more than the cold air in the chamber. Her lips moved again, forming sounds that brushed against silence like broken whispers. He did not understand the language, but he felt the weight of it. Each sound carried sorrow, rage, and memories of war. She was not just a survivor. She was a soldier who had carried something beyond herself. Elias leaned closer, tried to match her breath, hoping to bridge the gap between two lives torn apart by time. For a brief second, her eyes opened. Blue light flared like a hidden sun, sharp and piercing. Elias felt his knees weaken. The glow was not just beauty. It was power, ancient and unbroken, a light that had once commanded armies. Then her eyes closed again, leaving him shaking in the silence. He dropped his head, his heart racing, knowing he had seen the spark of a warrior who had never truly died. He turned quickly, scanning the chamber, making sure no one else had followed him. The rest of his crew was still combing through the wreck, unaware of what he had discovered. Elias knew he could not trust them, not because they were enemies, but because men with greed in their eyes would see her as a weapon. Humanity had a history of turning miracles into tools of war. He refused to let her fall into those hands. The pod shifted, releasing a stream of warm air that filled the chamber with a strange scent. It was metallic and sweet, like the memory of burning forests. Elias coughed, but then stilled, realizing that the pod was changing its state. The glass shimmered and lines of light raced across its surface, unlocking systems that had slept for centuries. He backed away, unsure if he had triggered something he could not control. Then the chamber itself responded. Lights that had been dead for lifetimes flickered to life. The walls glowed faintly, showing battle carvings etched in alien symbols. It was not just a ship. It was a tomb, a memory sealed in steel. Elias felt as if he had awakened not one, but many. The girl was the center, but around her was a history that refused to stay buried. He swallowed hard, realizing he had trespassed into something sacred. The hum slowed, steady now, almost calm. Elias knelt again beside the pod, lowering his head until his forehead rested against the glass. "You are not alone," he whispered. His voice shook, but he meant the words. He did not know if she could hear him, but his heart told him she could. The pod answered with a low vibration, and her chest rose again, stronger this time. He closed his eyes, knowing the war she carried inside her was not over, and that soon it would find him too. Elias forced himself to breathe slowly as the pod's glow settled into a steady rhythm. The silence pressed against his ears, but it was no longer the silence of death. It was a silence before something greater. He touched the side of the pod again, and his fingers buzzed with energy that felt alive. He whispered her alive in his mind, because now there was no doubt. She was not a memory. She was still here. The chamber seemed to pulse with her. Ancient wires hummed, lights flickered, and broken screens tried to wake. Elias could almost see the past breathing through the walls. He wondered if the ship had been waiting for her to rise, guarding her in a cage of ruin until the right hand came. He did not want to think that he was at hand, yet everything pointed to it. The thought weighed heavily on him as he looked at her peaceful face. Her armor continued to glow brighter in sections, like veins of fire burning under stone. The glow traced lines across her arms and chest, marking her as something beyond human. Elias studied it carefully, tried to imagine the technology behind it. It was both armor and body, both protection and life support. Whoever had built it had created more than steel. They had created a bond between warrior and machine that blurred the line of flesh and fire. His comm device buzzed on his belt, reminding him that time was slipping away. He ignored it. Outside, his crew thought he was only exploring another corridor. They did not know he had found the one secret that could change everything. Elias closed his eyes and pictured what would happen if he told them. Greed, panic, fear. They would strip the pod, sell it to the highest bidder, or worse, wake her with violence. He could not let that happen, not while she was still fragile inside her tomb. The hum from the pod deepened. Symbols along its frame shifted again, arranging into patterns that almost looked like words. Elias leaned closer, studying them, but the language was older than anything he had seen. Yet somehow, his mind began to connect shapes to feelings. He did not know the language, but he felt the meaning. The symbol spoke of loyalty, of sacrifice, of a war that had no end. They told him she had fought for something greater than herself, and now that fight might reach him. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a loud crack echoed through the chamber. Elias snapped his head up. The ship was collapsing under its own weight. He looked at the pod, glowing brighter now, and then back at the shaking walls. He had two choices: leave her behind to save himself, or risk everything to pull her out. His chest tightened with the weight of the decision. For the first time in years, he did not feel like a captain. He felt like a man standing at the edge of destiny. He grabbed the sides of the pod, searching for handles or locks. The surface was smooth, seamless, but as soon as his fingers pressed harder, sections of the pod responded. Panels shifted, and a faint hiss of air escaped. The glass cleared once more, and her face shone against the glow. Elias pressed his forehead against the glass again, as if promising her that he would not leave. The ship groaned louder, but he did not move away. Her eyes fluttered again. This time they opened longer. Blue fire burned within them, sharp and unyielding. She looked at him through the glass, not with confusion, but with recognition. Elias's heart skipped. She knew him, or at least she knew what he represented. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, as the glass between them vibrated like a wall about to break. He realized then that the war she came from was not truly over, and that the moment she rose, it would find him too. The ship groaned again, and Elias felt the floor tilt under his boots. Dust rained from the ceiling, falling across his shoulders. He braced himself with one hand on the pod, refusing to step back. She was watching him now, her eyes glowing like living fire. He had never seen such intensity, and yet her gaze did not feel hostile. It felt like a challenge, a test to see if he would run or stay. He stayed. Her lips parted, and a faint word slipped through, carried on a voice that had not been heard for 150 years. Elias could not understand it, but the sound made his chest ache. It was soft and strong at once, carrying both command and sorrow. He leaned closer, trying to catch every breath. She blinked slowly, her eyes never leaving his. He felt as though he had been chosen for something he could not yet name. The pod responded to her stirring. Locks hissed, panels shifted, and light streamed across the chamber. Symbols ran like rivers across the glass, pulsing faster, as though announcing her return. Elias staggered back as the glow filled every corner of the room. He raised his arm to shield his eyes, but he never looked away from her. This was no accident. She was waking because of him. His presence had been the key that time had been waiting for. The chamber shook again, harder this time. A sharp crack ran across the ceiling, and pieces of broken steel crashed to the ground. Elias knew he was running out of time. If the wreck collapsed, both he and the girl would be lost. He looked at the pod and then at the falling ruins. Every instinct as a soldier told him to retreat, but something deeper told him he could not leave her. He had fought battles for survival before, but this was different. This was a battle for destiny. He placed his hand back on the glass. The glow shifted under his touch, and the symbols reorganized again. This time, the glass began to melt away, peeling back like water turning to steam. Elias gasped as the barrier between them thinned. Warm air washed over his face, carrying that strange metallic scent again. He could feel her breath now, faint but steady, like a flame hidden in ash. He whispered without meaning to, telling her she was safe, though he was not sure if it was true. Her eyes softened for a moment, and then her hand twitched again. Slowly, painfully, her fingers lifted from the surface beneath her. Elias pressed closer, lowering his hand to match hers on the other side of the fading glass. When her palm touches through the barrier, a shock of heat surged into his body. His breath caught, his muscles tensed, but he did not pull away. It was not pain. It was recognition, a bond sealed by fire and silence. The sound of tearing metal filled the chamber. Elias turned his head and saw a massive beam shift above him. If it fell, it would crush them both. He cursed under his breath and made a choice. Reaching to his belt, he pulled free a cutting charge. His fingers shook as he placed it against the side of the pod, praying the device would work the way he wanted. He set the charge, the timer flashing red. The beam creaked louder, and the chamber screamed with the weight of collapse. The glass of the pod gave way completely, dissolving into a cloud of light. Her hand pressed fully into his, skin against skin, hot and alive. Elias stared into her eyes, and she stared back, no longer asleep. The charge detonated against the side of the pod, blasting free the locks and tearing open the chamber wall. Metal screamed, fire sparked, and the wreck around them began to fall. But in that chaos, Elias realized the truth. She was alive, and now there was no turning back. The blast shook the chamber and threw Elias against the wall. He gritted his teeth, pushing himself back to his feet. Sparks rained down, fire licked across broken panels, and the ship screamed as its structure gave way. But his eyes found her first. The girl was no longer sealed behind the pod. She stood in the light, her armor glowing like molten stone, her breath sharp and alive. She looked fragile yet unyielding, as if she had carried centuries inside her chest. Her gaze locked onto him, unblinking, piercing. Elias felt his knees weaken under the weight of it. She was smaller than he expected, but the aura around her filled the chamber like a storm. He swallowed hard, trying to find words. She tilted her head, studying him, her blue eyes burning with recognition of something he could not understand. For a moment they stood in silence, man and warrior, staring through fire and dust. The ship groaned again, and a section of the wall collapsed with a violent crash. Elias rushed forward, pulling her aside just as debris slammed into the floor where she had stood. Her balance wavered, and for the first time he realized she was weak. The pod had preserved her, but it had not restored all her strength. She stumbled, her hand pressing against his chest for support. He steadied her, feeling the warmth of her armor burning through his suit. She spoke again, words spilling a language he did not know. Each sound was foreign yet powerful, carrying a rhythm like command. Elias shook his head. "I don't understand," he said, his voice rough. She stared harder at him, then repeated the words, slower this time, as if demanding his memory to awaken. He could not reply, but something in his chest stirred with each syllable. He felt as though the words reached deeper than his mind, clawing at his soul. The ceiling cracked once more, and a beam of light burst through the dust. Elias looked up and saw the sky, faint and cold to the torn wreck. They had little time before the ship fell entirely into ruin. He tightened his grip on her arm and pulled her forward. She resisted at first, her eyes blazing as if she refused to be led. But then she coughed, her body shuddering with weakness, and she allowed him to guide her. Together they pushed through the collapsing chamber, sparks falling like dying stars around them. As they reached the torn passage, the ground lurched in through Elias to his knees. He wrapped an arm around her, shielding her from the falling debris. For the first time, she looked at him not with authority, but with something softer. Her hand touched his shoulder gently, and she whispered a word he almost understood. It sounded like trust or maybe hope. The sound cut to the chaos like a promise, and Elias realized she was beginning to see him not as a stranger, but as an ally. They stumbled through the wreck, their steps clumsy but determined. Behind them, the pod chamber collapsed completely, sealing forever the place where she had slept. Elias glanced back only once, his chest tight. That chapter of her past was gone, buried in fire and dust. Ahead lay only the unknown. He tightened his grip on her arm and pressed forward. His heart told him there would be no turning back now, not for him and not for her. As they emerged into the open air, the night sky greeted them with cold stars. The wreck loomed behind, broken and burning, casting shadows across the barren ground. She turned her head slowly, gazing at the stars as if seeing them for the first time. Her lips moved, whispering words too soft for him to catch. But he knew what they meant. She was not mourning the past. She was calling to it. The war she carried inside her was not done, and he had just stepped into its path. The night air was sharp against Elias's skin as he guided her away from the burning wreck. The stars above stretched like endless eyes watching their every move. She leaned against him, her steps heavy but steady. Every breath she took sounded like a battle in itself. Yet her eyes never left the sky. They blazed with fire, as if the stars themselves were calling her back into a war no one remembered. Elias's comm device buzzed again at his side. He ignored it, afraid that even a whisper to his crew would bring them rushing here. They would see her as a prize, as something to sell or weaponize. He could not risk that. She looked too fragile, too human in this moment. Even though he knew she was far from it, her hand tightened briefly on his shoulder, and he understood. She knew she could not be seen by others, not yet. They reached a ridge overlooking the ruins. Elias helped her sit against a stone, her glowing armor lighting the shadows around them. She closed her eyes briefly, her chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. Elias crouched before her, studying her face. She was younger than he imagined, yet her expression carried centuries. She looked like someone who had seen kingdoms rise and fall, and who had never truly stopped fighting. He realized then that she was not just a survivor. She was a reminder. She opened her eyes again and spoke softly. The words were broken, sharp, but filled with command. Elias shook his head helplessly, unable to understand. She frowned, then pressed her hand against his chest again. A wave of heat surged through him, and suddenly images flashed across his mind. Stars burning, fleets colliding, warriors falling with fire in their eyes. Her language was not just sound, it was memory. It was reaching into his mind, forcing him to feel her story. Elias gasped, stumbling back, but the images did not leave. He saw her standing on a battlefield, her armor glowing brighter than any weapon. He saw ships collapsing in the void, and a shadow that spread across the stars like poison. He saw her people screaming, fighting, falling, and then her body carried into the pod. The last thing he saw was her hand pressed against glass, waiting for someone to find her. Then the vision ended, leaving him trembling in the cold night. She watched him carefully, as if judging whether he was worthy of what she had shown. Elias dragged in a breath, his voice breaking. "Your ward isn't finished, is it?" She did not answer with words. She only lifted her hand, pointing to the sky. Elias followed her gaze. At first he saw only stars. Then he noticed one star was moving, slow but steady. His blood ran cold. It was no star. It was a ship, and it was watching. He pulled her closer against a stone, shielding her from view. His heart raced as memories of battle rushed back. He had fought in wars before, but this was different. That ship was not human. Its shape was alien, sleek and sharp, like a predator gliding through the void. He knew without doubt that it was connected to her. Whoever had hunted her before had not forgotten. They were still searching, even after 150 years. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw set with silent fury. She pressed her hand against his once more, her armor glowing brighter. Elias felt the fire of her determination burn through him. She was weak now, but her will was stronger than the wreck that had held her. She would not hide, not from them. Elias looked at her and realized that he had no choice either. Her war had become his, and together they would face what the stars had sent to find them. The alien ship in the sky drifted lower, its shadow stretching across the barren land. Elias clenched his jaw, knowing they had been seen. The girl rose slowly beside him, her armor glowing brighter with each breath. She looked weaker than her fire suggested, but the determination in her eyes told him she would not bow. Elias tightened his grip on his weapon, though he knew it was useless against what was coming. The ground trembled as smaller craft broke away from the larger ship and descended. Dust whipped through the air, stinging his face. The girl stepped forward, her glowing figure a beacon against the night. Elias wanted to pull her back, but something in her stance stopped him. She was not afraid. She was not hiding. She was standing as she once had, as a commander of fire and war. Her past was rising again, and she was answering its call. Figures emerged from the smaller crafts. Tall, armored warriors with weapons that shimmered like blades of light. Their movements were sharp, practiced, ruthless. Elias felt the weight of their presence, the same weight he had felt in the vision she had shared with him. These were the hunters, the ones who had chased their people across the stars. They had returned to finish what they had failed centuries ago. The girl raised her hand, and her armor pulsed in response. Symbols lit across her chest and arms, sending waves of energy into the air. The warriors halted, their weapons raised, but none dared to move closer. Her voice rang out, clear and sharp, though Elias did not understand the words. The sound carried strength, authority, and fury. Even after 150 years, her command still froze enemies in their tracks. Elias stepped to her side, lifting his weapon. He knew he was only a man with steel in his hands, yet in that moment he felt more than human. Her fire had touched him, and he would not abandon her. He spoke loudly, his voice shaking but strong. "You'll face both of us." The words meant nothing to the warriors, but the message was clear. He would stand with her, no matter what came. The warriors advanced at last, their weapons blazing with light. The girl spread her arms, and a shield of glowing energy burst from her armor. The blast struck against it, shaking the ground but not breaking through. Elias fired his weapon, striking one of the warriors and sending him crashing to the dirt. The battle erupted in chaos, light against light, fire against steel. Yet through it all, Elias and the girl stood as one. She moved with the grace of memory, even weakened by time. Her strikes were precise, her shield unyielding. Elias fought beside her, covering her flank, his blood pounding with every shot. Together they carved a path through the enemy, their strength multiplying in unity. For every strike he made, her shield held. For every step she faltered, his hand steadied her. They were no longer strangers. They were bound by war and survival. At last the ground stilled. The remaining warriors retreated to their crafts, dragging their fallen with them. The larger ship above trembled, then turned away, vanishing back into the stars. Silence fell again across the land. Elias dropped to his knees, exhausted, his weapon falling from his hand. The girl stood tall, her armor dimming but her eyes still burning. She looked down at him, and for the first time since he found her, she smiled. Elias met her gaze, his chest heavy with both relief and fear. He knew this was not the end. The hunters would return. The war she carried inside her would soon stretch across the galaxy once more. But he also knew one thing with certainty. Humanity was no longer just an observer. They were part of this war now, and he had chosen his side. He reached up, taking her hand, and whispered the truth he could no longer deny. "We fight together." She squeezed his hand firmly, her fire and his will joining as one, as the stars above seemed to blaze brighter in witness to their vow.